In 1980, on a quiet stretch of Venice Beach, 7 youthful architects gathered for what would become an iconic photograph. At the time, they were bold innovators, shaping a new architectural language rooted in Los Angeles, but destined for global impact. This single image captured the energy of a moment, a group of creators poised to redefine their craft. 45 years later, 4 members of that group reunite to reflect on their groundbreaking careers, the city they helped transform, and the enduring legacy of their work. Tom Main is a Pritzker Prize award-winning architect and co-founder of Morphosis, known for bold, unconventional buildings in cities across the globe. Eric Owen Moss is best known for transforming a stretch of Culver City into a neighborhood of wild, one-of-a-kind structures. Craig Hodges is a designer who blends architecture with pop culture and technology, co-founding the influential firm Hodgetts and Fung. Frederick Fisher has created many beloved spaces for museums, schools, and artists that feel welcoming and serene. Through candid conversations and a restaging of that legendary photograph, this film charts the evolution of their ideas, their friendships, and the architectural soul of Los Angeles itself.
This is the true story of how the photograph came to be, because I
created the whole situation.
at that same time, the Pacific Design Center had just recently opened. And they had created what I still today call West Week, in which all the furniture
Designers show me the thing. And Knoll Furniture had a showroom there. And I had met a woman who was the design director and wife of the owner, Nan Swid. And I'd met her. And she calls me up one day and she says, you know, there's this West Week thing happening. She said, we didn't know about it. Can you do something? And I said, well, yeah, sure, I can do something. And so I go to the opening, and there is a woman there who comes to be an editor at, I believe it's Interior or.
And so she says, oh, this is wonderful, da, 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 da. And she says, I'd love to do an article on you. Scared the hell out of me because I didn't have that much work. I was very, very nervous about it. So I said, no, don't do that. I said, let me put together a group. And we used to do it in terms of a group. And she said, oh, that's a marvelous idea. So then I called everybody. And my studio is taken right in front of my studio. I had a studio on the corner of Dudley and Oceanfront. Robert had a studio behind me on Dudley, and Craig had a studio around the corner on the Rose. But it was directly in front of my studio. So that's exactly how that story happened and how it actually. The whole reason that this thing was even possible at that time was because Ray Cappy created SciArc in 1972.
And Tim Vreeland became director of the School of Architecture at UCLA in 1969.
And at that time, there was no architecture school at UCLA. And Tim hired some young faculty members to come in and discuss what a new architecture program might be like. So they were all young people, and most of them East Coast, Berkeley, really bright guys. And Cappy at the time had started the school there. Right? Cappy brought all the faculty from Pomona. So it was those two people and the creating of those two programs during that period of time that essentially allowed this to happen. Because both of those deans, directors were very open to having a lot of young people come in and try to figure out what the hell architecture should be and what it should take place. But they were the linchpins in terms of making that possible. Why I picked was because I knew people, the young faculty in those schools. And so I picked those that I had known. The other part of that is during that period of time, The only way that you became
known in the architectural world as a young person was to win an award in Progressive Architecture magazine. And all of us basically raced like hell for September the 30th to get some drawings together and submit and win some awards. Almost all of us, I think, won several of those awards. So it was that group that I knew that basically were.
I hate to use the word ambition because I don't think that that's what motivated us. It wasn't ambition. It was really,
We were really much more interested in trying to find venues for our self-cultivation. It was really more about sort of actualizing ourselves in terms of what we thought
we could do with architecture, what architecture could do for us personally. And so that's sort of how I chose to select those people. I knew Frank through a soiree that Harvey Perloff, who was the director and dean of the School of Architecture,
he would have Sunday afternoon soirees. He would invite professionals to come in and meet young faculty. He was trying to, in fact, because there was really no significant intellectual architectural culture in Los Angeles prior to this time. There was good architecture, but there was no really core, no sort of gravitas to that discussion. So, and I had, as a young faculty member at UCLA, I had taken on the responsibility of promoting all the visitors we had. So I did a whole series of posters, and I would design these posters, get them printed, and then we would mail them out to all the local offices. So those posters, for example, now are in museums in 7 permanent collections. LACMA has almost all of them. Santa Barbara has all of them. So it was really, that is how I met Frank, was one of those soirees. And I met him because I had worked with his sister, Doreen Nelson, on the city building program. I had helped teach in the Venice elementary school that with her. And so the time that I first met Frank was we were both exiting. I hadn't met at the soiree. We met exiting. And so Frank and I were sort of going out the door together, and I said, I know your sister. And he says, really? And I said, yeah, I work for the city building program. Frank said, you know I designed that. And I said, sibling rivalry? And he looked, he said, you have to talk to me. He said, so you come to my office and we're going to have lunch. That's how I met Frank. We all know each other, but we're not like drinking buddies every night. There's not that kind of intimacy. I mean, Fred Fisher was a student of mine. I brought him into that group. In addition to corralling that group for that photograph, I'd created a show at what used to be called, it was a gallery. And I created a drawing show, physical facts, psychic effects. And I put them all in that show as well. So, I mean, at that time we were, as I said, this was all the PA award kind of time. So we were all
doing drawings.
Surprised? Not really. I think the biggest surprise is Tom, in the sense that Tom, when I first met Tom, he was an angry young man. And Tom basically at a certain point in his life decided that he couldn't be angry anymore. He was not going to be successful. He couldn't be angry. So he's become a sweetheart,
The computer,
the media, all of these things have totally changed architecture, totally changed the ambitions of all the students, and totally changed the sense of education. One of the things which is never talked about in architecture education is that during the early 70s, there was a major change in architecture education. And that major change was, prior to that, all schools had 5-year undergraduate programs. In the 70s, and I don't know who started this, probably Berkeley, but they began to have master's programs, because there really weren't that many master's programs. MIT, Harvard, Yale, those are the only real master's programs that there were. They began to have master's programs, which allowed a 4-year undergraduate student in any topic come to a school and for 2 years take architecture education. That was a major, major shift in the dynamic
in architecture academics.
And the reason for that is that when you go to 5 years of undergraduate school in architecture, you have a totally different kind of training than if you go to 4 years in economics or Russian literature or psychiatry or whatever it is, and then you do 2 years of architecture. You're still a psychiatry student. You still have that value system and that intellectual framework to process in the world. When those students graduated, what do they want to do? They want to teach. So all of that shift in the 70s, that's now in our schools, almost all the people that teach basically have some combination of that. With us, it was about making things. It was about doing things in the world. This group of people is about talking about things, about putting theory to things. But a theory is not making something. A theory should come after you make something, but they put the theory before and try to, but none of them ever really make anything. Most of the young faculty never design a building. They do little installations, they'll do a book, they'll do a catalog, but they never do a book. When I came here in 1969, and it's exiting back, one of the other reasons that all of it did what we did was because there was not an institutionalized architectural institution. There wasn't. I mean, there was the AIA and all that, but there was not a vibrant network. If I had gone to New York and been fortunate enough to do some work, and I needed help, I could call up Philip Johnson and say, look, I don't know how to detail this glass. And Philip Johnson would say, call such and such, call such and such, call such and such. Give me these rolling backs. And I was calling. There was nobody here you could call. Nobody. Okay? Or I didn't know them.
And I had conversations with Tom about this, and Tom said he didn't feel that about it. We had to invent everything. So the major change is as you said about
school. They mature. So the city has matured architecturally, right? In that sense. Now there's all sorts of consultants that there wasn't before, and now it's also not only local but it's global. So there's a much more interconnectedness that basically, in some ways, puts a damper on creativity. So it says, "Hey, you don't have to work so hard. And there's other people that can help you here, right?" I never really felt comfortable with that personally myself. I like figuring it out. I just love the pleasure of figuring out the puzzle, how to do it, really, But the city has changed primarily because there's an institutionalization that's taking place. There's a sort of set of
unknown written rules that sort of how it all
all over the place. The major shift is the moneyed culture. It used to be that somebody who made it rich would, sort of rather than build a building, they would, buy a yacht and sail to Fiji. That's what the West Coasters did. East Coast is very much entrenched in old money, and they have a stronger cultural sense. The West Coast did not, Southern California, Los Angeles did not have, we have no deep entrenched values of culture. East Coast is very much, New York is much more like Europe than it is like Chicago or Los Angeles. And so it's very, very different that way. So there's in a sense, much less so than I would really like, certainly. I always felt that Los Angeles should become much more like Japan and much more like Mexico. And unfortunately, not in, it is, but not in the way that I actually wanted it to. I wanted it to do that more in the sense of the caring for the craft of things and the vibrancy of all of that.